This is another podcast from Alpha Business Media. Welcome to another deep dive where we take your sources and really unpack the most important nuggets of knowledge. Today, we're heading to Nepal, looking at a sector that's just, well, absolutely vital there. We're talking about livestock. It supports, I think, over half the population, but it faces some pretty serious challenges.
That's absolutely right. The source material we're diving into today is a key report on this. It really makes it clear. Livestock is roughly half of Nepal's agricultural GDP, and agriculture itself, that's a massive part of their economy.
And it goes beyond just the economics, doesn't it? It's deeply personal for millions. The report points out, over 52% of people rely on livestock for their livelihood. And for poor rural families, these animals often act as a kind of live bank account, a safety net.
Exactly. A source of food, definitely income and security. But here's the thing, the paradox the source really highlights. Despite its huge importance and, growing demand inside Nepal for milk and meat, productivity is just surprisingly low. So low, actually, that Nepal ends up importing quite a bit of livestock products.
Right. Low productivity in a place with such incredible natural diversity. You've got everything from tropical lowlands right up to the high mountains. That does feel like a huge missed opportunity. This report digs into why that gap exists, between the potential and the reality.
It really does. It identifies this complex web of interconnected issues. It calls it a low productivity trap. So it's not just one single thing, but several problems all tangled up, holding the sector back.
A trap. Okay, let's get into this report then and understand that trap. What's our mission here for this deep dive?
Our mission is to unpack these systemic challenges that the report lays out and, maybe more importantly, look at the evidence-based strategies it suggests to, boost productivity and profitability. The report kind of structures this around four key knots holding things back.
Four knots. Okay, what are they, according to the source?
So number one, this persistent, really fundamental feed shortage. Then critical issues around animal health and genetics. Third, inefficient logistics and market infrastructure. And finally, the fragmentation, farmers being isolated and a lack of effective collective action.
And the report saying you can't just pick one and fix it. They're all linked.
Precisely. They're deeply interconnected. The report really stresses this. You need a comprehensive systemic approach. You have to look at the whole value chain because, a weakness in one part just undermines any gains you make somewhere else.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, let's start untying these knots then, beginning with what the report calls the most fundamental one, that chronic feed shortage.
Yeah, it's really presented as the foundation for everything else. The numbers in the report are quite stark. There's a huge deficit in available feed, something like a 33% shortage in dry matter, and over 50%, 52.8% actually, in protein. And protein's crucial.
So we're not just talking about animals being a bit hungry. This is systemic undernourishment.
And it gets really bad in the dry winter and spring months. Natural pastures are limited, and often animals are just eating traditional stuff like rice and wheat straw. The report points out these basically offer, virtually no nutritional value.
Wow. That sounds like a diet that just keeps them alive, barely. Forget about being productive. No wonder weight gain is slow, milk yields are down, and any investment in better breeds kind of goes to waste.
Exactly. The source really emphasizes that this feed deficit means animals barely survive, let alone thrive. That's why solving the feed problem isn't just important. The report basically says it's the fundamental prerequisite for any real progress. But the good news is the report does outline some really smart, practical ways to tackle this.
Okay, smart strategies for feed. What does the report suggest farmers can actually do?
Well, it starts with moving beyond just, relying on whatever grass grows naturally and actively cultivating modern forage crops. The source lists specific high-yield types like oats, vetch, bersim, nepure, mulatto, those sorts of things.
Okay, I've heard of some of those. What makes them good for Nepalese farmers specifically?
The report highlights two things. Their high green mass yield, so you get a lot more food per area, and their adaptability. Crucially, they can grow well even on small marginal plots or on terraces or just along the edges of fields.
So farmers don't necessarily need lots of new land. They can use what they have more effectively.
Exactly. Create a more stable, year-round source of quality nutrition right there on their existing farm.
Okay, optimizing space. What's another strategy you mentioned?
Silage. The report uses a great analogy. It calls it canned food for livestock. It's basically preserving green forage through fermentation so you can use it later, especially during those dry months.
Canned grass. I like it. How do they make it in a way that's accessible?
Well, the common method mentioned is silo pits. Basically, you dig a trench or a pit, line it with plastic film, then you pack it really, really tightly with chopped green stuff. Corn is common to get all the air out. Seal it up, cover it, and let it ferment for a couple of months. And the report says good silage has this pleasant, sour smell, yellowish green color. Nutritious feed preserved.
Sounds like it needs a bit of space, maybe some labor. What about those farmers with really tiny plots of land?
Ah, that's where little bag silage, or LBS, comes in. The report points this out as a brilliant solution for very small farms. You just chop the green forage, maybe let it wilt a tiny bit, then pack it into strong plastic bags, maybe 5-10 kilo capacity, squeeze all the air out, seal them tight. It's low investment and really efficient for preserving even small amounts of surplus green feed.
That sounds incredibly practical for the smallholder reality there.
Yeah.
Any other feed sources highlighted?
Absolutely. Agroforestry, basically, integrating forage trees into the farm. The report notes this is actually a traditional practice, but it can be enhanced. Trees like Artocarpus lacucha, they call it Badacar locally, and different types of ficus, these are highlighted as great sources of high-protein feed.
Trees providing animal feed. That's interesting.
Yeah, and particularly valuable during that dry season when other green stuff disappears. Planting them along field edges, on terraces, even on wasteland. It creates what the report calls vertical pastures. So you get nutritious leaves without taking up land needed for food crops.
So grow better forage crops, make canned food with silage, use trees as vertical pastures. It really sounds like the report offers concrete ways to build that better feed base.
And it's absolutely crucial. The message from the source is crystal clear. You just can't expect high milk yields from a hungry cow. Doesn't matter how good its breeding is. Investments in genetics or health, they're fundamentally limited if the animals don't get quality feed.
Right. Okay. So fundamental feed base established. Then the next hurdle, the next knot, is keeping those animals healthy and boosting their genetic potential for productivity. Because like you said, even a well-fed animal won't do well if it's sick or just not bred for production.
Exactly. And the report outlines some pretty significant challenges in just accessing animal health care in Nepal. Getting to a professional vet, very limited. The source estimates only about 15% of households have decent access. Plus, there's a lack of basic diagnostic tools, issues keeping vaccines cold out in the field, the cold chain.
And the cost of that lack of access must be huge for farmers.
Yeah, significant economic losses from diseases that are actually preventable. Foot and mouth disease, mastitis, they're widespread, they cut productivity, animals die. And remember, when an animal is your live bank account, losing one to something preventable is just devastating.
So how does the report suggest making vet care more accessible, especially out in the rural areas?
This is where Nepal has a really interesting system the report discusses. Village animal health workers, or VAHWs. These aren't full vets. They're community members who get short-term training, sometimes as little as 35 days.
Ah, so like paraprofessionals, trained locals providing basic services.
Precisely. And their huge advantage, according to the source, is proximity. They're close by. Average distance to a VAHW is about 1.4 kilometers. Compare that to nearly 22 kilometers to find a professional vet. Big difference. They can handle basic advice, treat common diseases, do artificial insemination, vaccinations, essential stuff. The report suggests really supporting the system, standardizing their training, ensuring the quality of supplies they use.
That sounds like a really practical way to bridge that huge distance gap. What about protecting farmers financially if they do lose an animal?
Livestock insurance is another tool the report points to. The government actually offers a big subsidy, covers 80% of the premium, so it should be affordable. But the report notes uptake is still really low, only about 1.1%.
Huh. Why so low if it's heavily subsidized? Is it just too complicated to claim?
That seems to be part of it, according to the source. Complex claim procedures, yeah, but also just a general lack of awareness among farmers that it even exists or how it works. And the report suggests agricultural cooperatives could play a key role here, helping farmers understand it, helping with the paperwork.
Okay, so that's health access and managing risk.
Yeah.
Now genetics. Unlocking that potential. The report contrasts the low productivity of local breeds with improved ones.
Yeah, local breeds are definitely hardy, they're resilient, adapted to tough conditions, but they just don't produce milk or gain weight at the rates needed to meet demand or really lift farmers economically, not compared to improved genetics or crossbreeds.
Does the report give concrete examples of genetic improvement making a real difference?
Oh, definitely. Take meat notes. The local Kari goat is tough, like I said, but slow growing. The report details results from crossing them with the Bow breed, that's a fast-growing meat breed originally from South Africa. These Bokhari crosses, they show average daily weight gains of 100 to 200 grams. They can reach a good market weight, around 45 kilos, by 18 months.
And the local curry on its own. How long would that take?
Well, a purebred curry might only reach about 26, 28 kilos in that same time. So, nearly double the weight, double the income potential. It's significant.
Oh, what about dairy? Can genetics make that kind of leap there too?
Even more dramatic, potentially. The report cites examples of Holstein Friesian crosses averaging over 9 liters of milk a day. Jersey crosses, over 7 liters. And with really good feeding and care, purebred Holsteins can push over 30 liters a day. That's several times what typical local cows produce.
That kind of jump could totally change a small farm's fortunes.
It absolutely could. And the report stresses that the most successful projects integrate genetics with other support. It highlights this Milky Way project run by Heifer International and partners, which imported high-yielding Holsteins. But crucially, they didn't just hand out cows, they set up a model dairy village. Intensive training on everything, care, feeding, health. And, importantly, they linked farmers to a guaranteed market through a women's cooperative called Shri Kamalamai.
Ah, so it's the package deal again. Better genetics plus the know-how plus the market connection.
Exactly. The report states the result was milk production actually doubling in that whole municipality in just 1 year. It's powerful proof that genetics needs that whole ecosystem around it to really pay off.
Right. And speaking of getting the product to the market, that leads us straight into the third knot, logistics and market infrastructure.
Yeah.
Because all that effort on the farm, the feed, the health, the genetics, it can all fall apart trying to get the product to the consumer, right?
Oh, absolutely. This is a critical weak spot the source identifies. It leads to huge losses, especially for perishable things like vegetables, fruits, even milk. Post-harvest losses, the report says, can be anywhere from 20% up to a shocking 50%.
Half the harvest potentially lost after all that work. That's
Yeah.
that crippling economically and emotionally for the farmer. What are the main culprits the report points to?
Often really simple but devastating things. Mechanical damage, bruising and crushing from poor handling, using flimsy bags instead of proper containers, lack of any pre-cooling to get the field heat out quickly after harvest, and then just incredibly inefficient transport, bad roads, not enough specialized or refrigerated trucks, vehicles getting overloaded.
And this inefficiency must feed into that paradox we talked about, farmers getting low prices while consumers are paying high prices in the cities.
Absolutely. Those losses add costs all along the chain, and farmers end up with less product to sell, often damaged product. The report even mentions farmers sometimes having to dump produce because the price they're offered doesn't even cover their costs, partly because of these inefficiencies. But again, the report highlights some really simple, accessible technologies that can make a huge difference here.
Simple tech. Okay, like what? Give us some examples from the source.
Okay, first one, plastic crates. RPC's returnable plastic crates. It sounds basic, but just switching from traditional soft bags to these rigid, stackable, reusable crates for transporting vegetables. The report cites studies showing this change alone cut shipping losses from around 30% right down to 5 or 6%.
Wow, that's a massive drop just from changing the container. Are they expensive?
The initial cost is higher, maybe $5 a crate or something, but they can be used hundreds of times. So long-term, very cost-effective compared to single-use bags and all that lost produce.
Okay, crates for transport. What about keeping things fresh before they even get transported or sold, especially without electricity?
Right. That's where zero-energy cooling chambers, or ZECCs, come in. This is a really neat low-tech solution the report talks about. Basically, you build double brick walls, and you fill the gap between the walls with wet sand. As the water evaporates from the sand, it naturally cools the inner chamber. And it keeps the humidity high, too.
Like a natural fridge, using evaporation.
Exactly. Made from local stuff, needs no power. It can keep the inside 10 to 15 degrees Celsius cooler than outside, and humidity over 90%. The report shows this extends the shelf life of vegetables by like 3 days, up to 15 days. That gives farmers crucial extra time to sell, maybe wait for a better price.
That's clever. And for storing grains, like corn for animal feed. Any simple tech there?
Yes, PICS bags. Purdue improved crop storage bags. They're 3-layer hermetic bags. They basically seal the grain off from oxygen so insects can't survive and multiply inside. No need for insecticides. Studies mentioned in the report showed they cut corn storage losses by about a third.
These all sound like really practical, relatively low-cost ways to stop so much waste.
They really are. But the report goes beyond just reducing losses. It also strongly pushes for adding value through processing, turning raw milk, meat, vegetables into products with a longer shelf life that can fetch higher prices.
Okay, value addition. Any standout products or success stories mentioned in the report?
Several great examples. One is chirpi. That's the traditional Nepalese hard cheese, usually made from yak or chari milk. It's found this amazing niche market internationally as a dog treat. In the US, Canada, Japan, the report notes exports grew almost 3.5 times in just 5 years. That traditional long drying process makes it super durable, perfect for export.
Chirpy as a global dog treat success. That's genuinely surprising
Yeah,
and fantastic.
isn't it a great story? The report also mentions things like gundruk and sinki. These are traditional fermented and dried vegetables, mustard leaves, radish. They're staples in Nepal, but also have a growing market among the Nepalese diaspora abroad. It mentions one small enterprise, Mandro Nepal, doing really well with these, making about 3 million rupees a year, and 60% of that is from exports.
And what about simpler processing that farmers can do themselves?
Yeah, basic things like turning excess milk into ghee clarified butter or paneer, fresh cheese. Simple to make, adds shelf life compared to fresh milk, and there's always demand. Solar dryers are another example. The report mentions a simple solar chimney dryer design that costs around $200. It gives the example of tomatoes. Farmers often face a glut, prices crash. But with a solar dryer, they can turn that surplus into dried tomatoes. Then they can sell those later in the off-season for a much better price.
So instead of losing money or dumping the tomatoes, you make a value-added product.
Exactly. Turns a potential loss into a profit opportunity. The report really emphasizes that the barrier here often isn't just the tech itself, but linking the knowledge capital market connections.
And I'm guessing this is another area where those cooperatives we talked about come in, helping make those connections.
Absolutely. Cooperatives are key. They can help members access small loans for things like a solar dryer or processing equipment, and then they can help organize the collective marketing and sale of these processed goods, finding better buyers.
The report also mentioned a need for better slaughterhouses.
Yes, that's a big bottleneck, especially for meat. Lack of hygienic, efficient facilities. The report proposes a public-private producer partnership, a 4P model. The idea is the local government provides land, a private investor builds and runs the slaughterhouse, and farmer cooperatives guarantee a supply of animals. Heifer International is mentioned again, promoting this model for goat slaughterhouses in cities like Butwal and Bukhara.
It really sounds like tackling these logistics and processing issues isn't just about stopping waste. It's about creating real income opportunities and market access, unlocking the value.
Totally. It's about capturing that potential that's currently just evaporating between the farm gate and the consumer's plate.
Which brings us nicely to our fourth and final mod. A big one that seems to underpin a lot of the others, the fragmentation of smallholder farmers. Individually, they often struggle to access markets, get information, find affordable finance. They lack scale.
That isolation is a fundamental weakness the report identifies. Individual farmers just don't have much bargaining power. But collective action is the answer here. The report presents cooperatives as absolutely vital institutions. They enable small farmers to overcome barriers that are just insurmountable on their own.
So how do they achieve that? How does strength and unity work through cooperatives?
Yeah. Well, fundamentally through collective marketing and supply, pooling produce. Lots of members bring their milk or vegetables or goats together. Now you have a large consignment that's attractive to bigger buyers, processors, retailers, and suddenly they have bargaining power. They can negotiate better prices. The report mentions a study showing farmers selling vegetables via a co-op, on average, are 16.4 more per kilo. Plus, they can do joint purchasing, buy feeds, seeds, even arrange transport together, cutting costs for everyone.
Right. Better prices selling, lower cost buying. Makes sense.
Exactly. And beyond trade, cooperatives act as these crucial local hubs for training, for introducing new tech, for accessing financial services credit, that insurance we talked about.
And the report also stressed their role in empowering women farmers, didn't it?
Very much so, especially important in Nepal, where lots of men migrate for work abroad, leaving women to run the farms. Women's cooperatives become these essential spaces for mutual support, sharing knowledge, getting training, building economic independence, and just confidence.
Can you remind us of one of those cooperative success stories from the report?
Yeah, several good ones. There was the Atipria Women's Cooperative focused on goats. Over 400 members. They provide training, vet services, link-ups, insurance access. They help members get nearly $90,000 in loans for buying livestock. They also pushed for selling goats by live weight for fair pricing and became a local resource center for that improved boar goat breed.
Okay, that's real impact financial knowledge, market access, and the dairy one from the Milky Way project.
Right. Sri Kamalamai Dairy Cooperative. Started small, grew hugely. The report details how their partnership with Heifer, the government, a private dairy, gave them access to those high-yield Holsteins, the technical support, and crucially, a guaranteed market for all the extra milk they started producing. Their daily milk collection volume more than doubled because of that whole package.
These cooperatives really do sound like powerful engines, connecting all the dots for individual farmers.
Indispensable, that's the word the report seems to use, and it also looks at another tool for connection and empowerment: digital technologies.
Okay, bringing digital tools into rural agriculture.
Yeah, exploring the potential. The report mentions some platforms already out there, like GeoCrishi. It gives farmers hyperlocal weather forecasts, advice from agronomists, market prices. It can even help diagnose diseases from a photo you upload. There's also the Kizan app from the Agricultural Development Bank, which links financial services with farming info.
Those sound incredibly useful on paper. But are farmers actually using them effectively? What are the hurdles the report found?
Yeah, that's the challenge. The report notes some significant barriers. Low digital literacy is one, especially among older farmers and women. The cost of mobile internet in rural areas can be high. Infrastructure reliable signal isn't always there in remote places. And often the apps themselves aren't perfectly designed for the users. Maybe the interface is too complex, it's only in English, no voice commands, needs constant internet.
So the tech potential is there, but that last mile, usability, access, cost, that's the real problem.
Exactly. So the solution proposed in the report is more of a hybrid approach. Digital tools need to work with traditional methods and those local support structures. GeoCrishi, for example, partners with cooperatives and local governments to run training workshops, so they reach farmers even if they don't personally own a smartphone or have internet at home. The report also suggests things like partnerships with mobile companies for maybe subsidized data plans just for farming apps, or using simple SMS alerts.
It really loops back to the cooperatives again, doesn't it? Acting as the bridge, the trusted channel to help farmers adopt and use these digital tools effectively.
That's a central point the report makes about getting any innovation out there, whether it's better breeds, new storage tech, financial products, digital apps. Cooperatives are crucial for that last mile delivery. They're seen as the most effective platform for distributing knowledge and scaling up solutions. So for investors, policymakers, NGOs, anyone wanting to make a difference, the report basically says, strengthening these farmer cooperatives is fundamental.
Okay, so pulling all these threads together, the core problem the report identifies in Nepal's livestock sector isn't really one thing. It's this low productivity trap caused by these four big, systemic, interconnected challenges we've just walked through.
That's the diagnosis, yeah. And it's critical because it means you can't just tinker with one piece and expect everything to change. Spot solutions won't break the trap.
So what will? What's the answer according to the report?
Synergy. That's the key concept. Achieving that vision of, rivers of milk and banks of meat, it requires an integrated approach. Improvements in one area have to support and enable improvements in others. Better feed enables better genetics to perform. Better genetics needs good health care. Healthy, productive animals need efficient logistics and markets. And strong farmer organizations using the right tech underpin all of it. Think back to that successful dairy farmer in the Milky Way project. She needed the quality feed and the vet care and the insurance and the efficient milk collection and processing, all brought together by her cooperative using modern tools and knowledge.
Right, it's the whole system working together that unlocks the potential, not just the individual part.
Precisely. And based on that principle of synergy, the report lays out key recommendations for different players, for farmers and their cooperatives. The big focus is building that feed base using modern crops, silage, and really actively participating in cooperatives for marketing, buying inputs, accessing services.
And for the private sector, for investors, where are the opportunities?
The report sees real potential in processing things like chirpy, ghee, dried vegetables, also in improving logistics like cold chains, better transport. That 4P model is highlighted for bigger investments like slaughterhouses or modern dairies. And there's opportunity in developing those localized, user-friendly digital platforms we talked about.
Okay, and finally, for the government and donors, what should their role be?
Key recommendations include things like reorienting subsidies maybe towards organic fertilizer for feed crops
Hmm.
or quality feed itself, legitimizing and strengthening that pair-vet system, simplifying complicated procedures for insurance claims or animal certification, and generally fostering an environment that encourages investment in cooperatives and agri-logistics.
It sounds like an ambitious blueprint, definitely, but one that seems grounded in practical, accessible solutions and strengthening existing structures like cooperatives.
It is. The report really makes a compelling case, I think, that seemingly small changes at the farm level, a backyard silo, a simple cooling chamber, when they're combined with powerful organizational tools like cooperatives, and when you layer on strategic appropriate use of technology, collectively, these things can unlock significant potential. It really comes down to coordinating effort across that whole system.
That really makes you think, doesn't it, about how we tackle complex problems generally. How could applying this idea of synergy, really understanding how different parts of a system are linked and need coordinated effort, like we saw in Nepal's livestock sector, how could that help us address other big challenges, maybe in our own communities or industries? Something to ponder.
It's a really powerful way to frame things, I agree. Those principles of integrated solutions and collective action, they often apply far beyond just agriculture.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into unlocking the potential of Nepal's livestock sector. A really powerful reminder about interconnected problems needing integrated solutions and that crucial role of collective action and synergy.
Indeed. We hope this deep dive gives you, the listener, a new lens, perhaps, for looking at how tackling complex challenges often means looking at the whole system.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a fascinating topic, drawing insights from the sources you share with us. Until then, keep asking questions and keep connecting the dots.